This is the Erin Cruz Show. Politics for the people and by the people. With your host, Erin Cruz.
Welcome to the Erin Cruz Show. We have on with us tonight a very special guest. We've had her on the show previously. She's an attorney. She's an educator. More than that, she really can explain to us where the founders were coming from when they wrote the founding documents and what it is as a people that we're facing today, because we've moved so far away from the basic scope of what this country was founded on. And so we're excited to have this gal on with us. This is Chris Ann Hall right here, live in the flesh. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm really happy to be back again. It's great to be here. Great to be with the Erin Cruz people and teaching about liberty this wonderful holiday season.
Yeah, well, you know, Thanksgiving we come to the table and we are thankful, right? We're thankful for everything that we're able to do. It goes right into the season where we start our worship and celebration, our religious freedoms, and we're really able to be who we are as a people. And that gets us back to how far we've come away from the founders' vision for this great nation. You know, we've seen, Chris Ann, that there has been such a divide of the American people, all of us as citizens, okay? Freedom-loving, liberty-loving people. The Democrat, Republican divide, there are libertarians and independents, sure, the Green Party, all these parties. But the divide on mass scale between the two large parties here in this country, it hasn't helped us. You know, where was it that the founders were in their vision for this country? Because I don't see this, what we currently have, as being it.
Well, no, it's actually, when it comes to political parties, it's very close to the opposite intent that our founders had. And so I think one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle that Americans might be missing today is the fact that political parties are not government. They are private corporate clubs.
Right.
And that's how they're able to discriminate in their membership. According to the Civil Rights Act of 1969, private corporate clubs can discriminate. And so that's why they can say, okay, you have to be a Democrat to be here. You have to be a Republican to be here. You have to be a Libertarian to be here. So we can discriminate because we're not government. We're private corporate clubs.
Now, let me get this straight, though, because I'm going to tell you that I am glad for the club process for, Boy Scouts of America, Girl Scouts of America, but just how they're used in terms of our political process is a concern.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So right now what we have are taxpayers' dollars used to fund the elections of private corporate clubs. Now, you and I know them as primaries. Primaries are not a civic function. Primaries are where the private corporate clubs choose their representative to represent their private corporate club in the general election. The general elections are the civic function. The primaries are the private corporate club functions. And so that's where we have come to, I think a lot of the error and the confusion has come in. We have started to believe that primaries are actually a civic function. Oh, I've got a right to vote in a primary. And then in that, we conflate the civic process with the corporate club process. And then we start to believe that these private corporate clubs are actually governmental entities. Now, what should be even more concerning, Erin, is the fact that now we have become pretty much a duopoly of private corporate clubs. And now what we have are private corporate clubs that make law, that dictate politics. These private corporate clubs
they're essentially large lobbyists. Organizations, essentially.
I mean, yeah, they are. Absolutely. I think that, hold on a second. I lost my camera for a second. There I am. Sorry.
Look at that. We're real.
Yeah,
you know what?
Here I am. Here I am.
Live and in the flesh here
flesh.
At the Erin Cruz show. We don't cut it. We're not going to clip it. We like real news, real information.
Oh man, Erin,
so
if they
even get that cut out, I'm sorry. It happens. Real life happens. But back to what you were saying.
If they even knew what it took me to get here on the show today, the technology problems I was having, this is minimal.
Here's the deal. You're not alone in that technology glitch issue of today. We stand right there with you, Chris Ann. Certainly we've experienced the same problems here at the Erin Cruz show, and also Erin Cruz with Erin Cruz U.S. Senate really has experienced issues. But getting back to the duopoly, if you will, not the monopoly, but the duopoly, this is an issue. This is a big issue because, as you said, you go from the civic process, the general election. What we have here in California, for example, you have the primary, then the top two go to the top two vote getters. And it's created an issue because most of the people here in California that are registered to vote are Democrats. So by and large, the majority will be Democrat. But we're a republic here in California. I mean, there are so many levels of problems with this. Where does the minority come in? I mean, that's one of the there's so many levels of issues of erosion from the way top to all the way bottom. This is what we want your help for, is to help the people understand the breakdown, and it's been systematic. And what the founder's vision was.
The problem, obviously, the symptom of the problem is the fact that our government's not operating properly.
Right.
The problem is the ignorance of the people as to how the government is supposed to operate.
Right.
So you can't have these problems if the people are educated on the right way to do things. Because people educated on the right way to do things aren't going to let the system break down.
Right.
But right now, because we have a broke down system with people who think that this is how it's supposed to work. The Republican and Democrat corporate clubs are supposed to dictate what laws we have, what laws we don't have. And now we see that they're dictating what judges we have, what judges we don't have, what kind of procedures our agencies operate under. Are they aggressive in this topic, or are they lax in this topic?
I like to call them agendists. Politics. I call them agendists in my upcoming book, because that's really what they are. It doesn't matter if they're a D or an R, an I or an L or whatever they are. They're agendists, and likely their agenda in many cases go against liberty and freedom and the Constitution.
Well, I call them federal supremacists, because regardless of the angle of their agenda, they're all for the supremacy of the federal government and expanding the government's role. And so what we have to understand is that we're not supposed to have people in government who are making decisions on law based on party, right? So you know how this works. Oh, I can't vote for that because the Democrats put that bill up, or I can't vote for that because the Republicans put that bill up. I remember when I was advising Marco Rubio's team, and there was a really good legislation that was put forward to almost neuter the indefinite detention provisions in NDAA. And the staff came back to me and said, Chris Ann, how can you possibly be in favor of this piece of legislation? The ACLU is in favor of this legislation. Orrin Hatch is in favor of this legislation. How can you be in favor of this? And I said, it's because my judgment is based on principles, not on tribalism. And even the ACLU gets it right every now and again, because they have the right kind of perspective on liberty sometimes.
Right.
Not often.
But they do. I have seen a couple of actions that they've taken and supported, which you almost are awestruck, and you look at it and you think, well, if they could only stick to that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, but they, again, with your book in mind, they have an agenda that gets in the way with their principles. And that's why, I unfortunately find myself on being hated by both sides, because I'm always, we have a motto,
as long as you're
liberty over
by
security.
liberty.
Yeah, we're liberty over security, principle over party, and truth over your favorite personality. That's how we work. And so our founders wanted us to elect people on that from that kind of perspective. We're not supposed to be electing people based on their political parties, sort of to steal a role from Martin Luther King. We're supposed to be electing people based on the content of their character, not the color of their party. And so you'd asked me what the founder said, and I think one of the clearest quotes that I can give you is from George Washington himself. Now, George Washington, being our first president of the United States under this Constitution, for anybody who out there maybe doesn't know that, he gave a farewell address. And in his farewell address, he spent a great deal of time talking about the dangers of parties. And he called them factions. Mm-hmm. And so let me read to you what he says. He says, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. He says, but this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, or sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turns this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. And so this alternate faction is, in Washington explains it in his farewell address, is just a simple matter of human nature. It's that spirit that gets within us of tribalism. And he said we have to he said we have to guard against that because it is a baneful foe to the liberty of America.
Absolutely, and yet, it is, and that's what we see in the division of today. You know, I talk about in my first book, you know, that we are Revolution America. The way we interact, the way we are, the way we look at ourselves, the way we look and approach other people. And we have to get away from that kind of collectivism of party, as he says, you know, the factions. It's hurting us. It's hurting me. It's hurting my family members. It's hurting my community. It's hurting us as a nation. And the biggest thing it's eroding is, you know, our freedom, liberties are literally at risk. And how do we get back? Because this is the other issue is, you know, we were talking about the party system, and then we were talking about California and the election, and we were talking about, you know, primaries and generals as far as the elections are concerned. How do we get back? Because I see that we're so far gone. I mean, in the sense that there's layer after layer after layer after layer after layer built up over time of this justification for what everybody has been doing and legislating and putting forward, and all these rulings have come forward, or, you know, how do we get back to that simple state so we can preserve our liberties and freedoms?
Well, the first thing that we've got to recognize, Erin, is that there is no magic pill.
No. There is no red pill, there is no blue pill.
No, and there's no incantation, and there's no quick fix. Right. I think that's part of the problem that we have today. Everybody's looking for a quick fix. There is no quick fix. We started veering away from the proper operation of our Constitution in 1833. So, I mean, seriously, that's 180 years ago. So we're not going to get back overnight. Now, Samuel Adams... Samuel Adams gives us a clue. He says, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. So the key to this is knowledge and virtue. The key to this is education and the courage to live according to the right convictions. And that's what we have in America. We have an educational crisis. We have a courage crisis. Mm-hmm. And so what I think is, for me, because I'm an educator, I think it all boils down to education.
Absolutely.
We have lots of people, you and I know lots of people who are involved in the movement that are students of the movement. They come to the meetings, they come to the rallies, they're very excited about all this stuff. But when it comes to take a public stand, when it comes time to actually put their beliefs into action, they hesitate or even pull back. And I believe the reason that they do that is because they are not confident in their foundation. In order to be confident in your foundation, you must be settled in your principles. And in order to be settled in your principles, you have to be well educated. Right. And it's something that we all recognize that we've missed for a very long time.
Right. Well, I know your mission and your journey has been to provide that education. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have you back on the show today, is to talk about, those fundamental issues, and then also to get back to what the founders talked about and what they had visioned regarding the party polarization. Getting people to that, I almost look at this like a rock bottom state. People have to realize that what we've been doing does not work. I mean, in terms of how we're approaching things, right? And we have to get back to the space where they want to take action and they want to take back their freedom and embrace liberty. But even in the terms of, say, even the Republicans who, and again, this is back to the party platform and the party club view, these are individuals who I view as probably the closest in some ways to embracing those fundamental value systems, vision that the founders had. But even still, it's you try to talk to some people about liberty, about freedom and the founders' vision, and they still are stubborn as all can be, and have it that there is no way we can survive without the party. There's no way we can be successful without this construct up with. And I don't believe that to be true. We even see that the Democrats, many of them are walking away from their own party. And the Republicans are frustrated with their party. So these people, all of us, have to get to a rock bottom where they're ready to feed on the information and the education and take it in and then apply the knowledge and see then the fruit of the labor behind the knowledge, the action, and then going forward. But what more can it be that we're faced with as a nation to where we're actually going to get to that point and see people taking restorative action? Because we're pretty close to a space where others are taking us over from within.
Well, Erin, that's the question of the century, and it's the question of every century. When will it be enough for the people to say enough? And I can't tell you the answer to that question, but I can tell you that inevitably that time will come, because it is proven historically that time will come. And so what we have to recognize then is that we have to be the catalysts for that realization, which means we ourselves must become educated to the point that we're able on a daily basis, on an ordinary and regular basis, to point out the things that are going on, to reach other people and show them. It's an unfortunate matter of human nature that things have to get really bad before we're willing to do anything. And I think about the Declaration of Independence, He says in the Declaration of Independence that it's only when things got so bad that we were willing to say it's time to change. And it's just simply a matter of human nature. I don't know. Are we as bad as it can get? I don't think so, because I think Americans still live pretty comfortably. And in reality, it's our comfort that's our biggest obstacle to liberty.
Right. No, and I hear you there. But in terms, I hate to go, I hear you there, but I didn't like the buts. But I hear you there. When we look at the Declaration of Independence, for example, and how we stepped away, and I'm going to put this very lightly, how we stepped away and we moved ourselves to the place where we said, well, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and then we had the construct that was brought up, the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all that. And then when I went to go visit the Tea Party site, the Boston Tea Party site, just a year and a half, 2 years ago, I go into their museum, their gift shop, and I look on the shelf, and they're selling English tea. And not only are they selling English tea, they're taxing it. And I know this sounds funny, right? But when you're trying to wrap your head around the very basics and fundamentals of what happened right there, and then what is now happening right there, the founders would be rolling in their graves. And you say, well, how far could we come? Well, we still have some ways to go, comfort. But I'm just looking at this from the standpoint of the polarization and the people losing grasp of where our priorities are, and the socialists who are taking over certain states and certain governments in terms of political parties, mainly the Democrat Party, and how this is really going to impact us as a whole as, this year rolls out and the next year rolls out and then the next election cycle comes in. How bad does it have to get? It's up to the people, I suppose, right? But what can we impart on them right now? We have you right here on the show. What can we impart on these individuals who are watching today who are fed up with the GOP or fed up with the Democrats or fed up with the party platform type system on the basics of what the vision was of the founders and how we can get back to that? Because I think education, provide them your website, provide them information on where they can get empowered, because you have an entire platform that provides this information source to the people and can help empower individuals on their conversation. I mean, but help them all.
Yeah, well, Erin, I think what's interesting is a lot of people, as we've been teaching the last 8 years, people have sort of slung out as a criticism, but Chris-Ann, all you're doing is teaching the choir. Well, I've got news for you. The choir is the one that needs to be educated. And
the choir has to learn the words to the song before they can sing, okay?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we, as Americans, I think one of the things that is most difficult is showing people how much error they have in their education that they have and how much more they need to know. Because I think we've had a good education system for so long, people are kind of arrogant in America about what they know, especially those who consider themselves conservatives, who consider themselves constitutionalists. But when we think about the fact that the education regarding our government, regarding the Constitution, regarding American history, has been tainted at best since 1833 and overall altered since 1865, we can't really be that confident in the education that we have. So we have to make people willing to say, okay, maybe I don't know things the way I'm supposed to know them. How do I find out more? Now, if you want to talk about what our founders had in mind, we have LibertyFirstUniversity.com, which has, I don't think we have over 40 courses online now. We're putting on new courses all the time. And that will give you really solid foundation to understand where they come from. But if you're looking for a course of action, I have a book called Sovereign Duty. And that teaches you where where our biggest course of action lies. And the first thing Americans who call themselves conservatives must do, Erin, and I don't want to burst anybody's bubble. I don't want to dash anybody.
Anybody knows, anybody who's probably on here, and maybe there are people who are not Erin Cruz related. They're just joining us now for this, and we're curious what you had to say. But most people who are on here understand it doesn't matter if you're, at the bottom, at the top, if you're a scholar or not. We all have a space where we can grow.
Right. Well, let's hope so. Well, the first thing that we need to do as conservatives, as constitutionalists, as Republicans, is to turn off the federal news cycle. Turn off the federal election addiction and get back to local government. If you want things to change, and I don't mean this hypothetically or facetiously, I mean this most literally. If you want things to change on the national level, you have to get involved at the local level. The midterms are passed. So after Thanksgiving, or even if you want to take a long break after Christmas, starting the first of the year, map out your county commission meetings, your city council meetings, set up a lunch meeting with your sheriff once a month, sit down with the school board meetings, make sure you attend them, schedule at least 2 or 3 times a month to go to your state capital and hang out and get to know your representative and your senator on the state level, see how things are functioning, watch them in session. You've got to introduce yourself to your governor, to your attorney general, and make yourself a lobbyist for liberty. And you can't do that if we're just tuned in every single day to the mainstream media news chain and their tribalistic chants of what's going on in Washington, D.C. Get back to local.
Yeah, get back to local. I love that. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I see the same issue with the party politics or factions, if you will, with our news media. You have the conservative or more rightly, and then you have, the mainstream media. And it's a mass polarization, and they're mirroring one another. And the biggest thing is they're hurting the people. And the people are suffering because they're so plugged in, and they're swallowing the mainstream news pill. But I agree with you, getting back local in our current area, and I'm not sure about many of the other places in California, but even in San Diego, where I did reside, the senators do have meetings here. They do come to town. They do attend some of the local organization get-togethers, and you can meet them face-to-face. You don't need a press pass. You don't need a special sign-up or anything. People just have to get activated and locally involved in the community action groups that are here. And that could be the club platform. That could be meeting people in different groups. But more
I think, Erin, it's just as important. Yeah, it's just as important to make your trip to the Capitol, so that you're not stuck in a crowd shaking hands, sharing the attention of your senator or your representative. You need to be able to sit down, even if it's just for 5 minutes.
I can call my senator, Senator Stone, and get together with him. Absolutely, people can do that. But I think people, and you make a good, strong point, people can do that. You're able to do that.
And you need to do that. Right. I mean, that's the important part. Let me grab something real quick.
But my point is that people maybe don't understand. They maybe think that these people are out of touch. Well, some of them might be. But these people, that is a space that you can go to. That's your capital. Of course, be polite, but reaching out and making appointments, that's not unheard of. And it's definitely something that you as the Erin Cruz Show listeners can do. And Chris Hall is advocating for. Chris Ann Hall is advocating for. Go ahead.
This is the book. I don't know. Is it backwards?
No, it's right way.
Okay. So this is the book that I'm talking about. It's Sovereign Duty, and it's on Amazon, Books A Million. You can get it at Walmart.com. I mean, it's sold everywhere. You can get it on my website, chrisannhall.com.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So what this book does is it teaches you not only why the local is important, but how the local is important.
Right.
And not just simply from Chris Ann Hall's opinion or from Erin Cruz's opinion, but using the words of the founders themselves.
Right.
They designed our constitutional republic where our states are supposed to be more powerful and more controlling than the federal government. And this book will explain to you why getting local is so important.
Right. And I thank you for that. For people who are listening right now, this is Chris Ann Hall. Down there, you can see her information, and definitely go online, look up her book, look up her Liberty University platform. There's a lot there that we can glean and grow ourselves. Now, Chris Ann, you talk about local, you talk about understanding how it works, because it's like a braid, right? It's all kind of intertwined together, and it comes up the states' rights, the federal rights. Californians are really frustrated right now. They are.
We have every right to be frustrated.
Yeah, it is frustrating. They're discouraged. They feel like their representatives aren't listening to them. Their elections are out of control. There's no repercussions for those people in power. I believe very firmly that local up is so vital in order to get to the point where we're functional at the top. Sure. Mm-hmm. The empowerment and the awareness on how people can get to that space is where people are lacking. I think that what can people do? They can read your book. They can go to Liberty University. But really, what would the founders, you've done massive study on their documents, on the founding documents. What would they say to these people? Which part of the United States Constitution would ring so true that it might wake up the people who are discouraged at home and empower them? Because that's part of it, is that oppression, and people just feel constrained.
Knowledge is not power without action. Right. And so we can consume all the knowledge we want, but if we're not willing to get out of our seats, if we're not willing to sacrifice minutes of our day, monies from our pockets, and our own personal economy and resources, then nothing is going to change. We can sit around, and I don't mean to be harsh, but we can sit around and complain and feel oppressed all we want. But nothing is going to change until we throw off that oppression ourselves. Nobody's going to pull you out of the muck and the mire. You've got to do it for yourself. And really, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Don't have these pity parties because the people are powerful. You've just forgotten. Got to get up and do it. You got to go to the council meetings. And if you keep going to the city council meetings and you speak up at the city council meetings, at the county commission meetings, and the school board meetings, and you figure out nobody's listening, step number 2 is you take their office. Mm-hmm. Because we need to get this under control. And getting under control is not something that happens just because you voted. Getting under control is not something that happened because you aggravated the news.
Say that again. I'm sorry. There was a feedback.
I said getting things under control is not just simply getting aggravated while you watch the news. You have to get out and do something. Life, fortune, sacred honor. That's what it cost our founders, and the price of liberty has not changed. But like I said, Erin, we've become so comfortable. Well, we have soccer practice.
I believe that's by construct. Much of it is by construct, because even the people who should be, and I'm not saying they should be because they're bad people, but even the people who are the most needy in our country have been made comfortable by government.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's by construct
and if you don't,
in many ways.
Right. If government is providing you with all your needs and you're comfortable, how are you ever going to want to do better for yourself?
Right.
And so, but see, here's the catch. Government wants you comfortable. Mm-hmm. Because if you're comfortable, then you're complacent. Mm-hmm. And they know that's how that works, because that's how human nature works throughout history.
Yeah, so some people talk about creeping Sharia. I call it, it's creeping communism. It just like I see the churn. I see the churn. You make the people at the bottom, and then you make chaos, and it's just this whole point of its construct. And I believe they are working towards a goal, and people need to get uncomfortable. They need to see the value of liberty, see the value of retaining our freedoms, and get to work locally, even if it means supporting somebody else who can run for office and getting involved locally. That's something we encourage, absolutely. So where, you teach all over the country, you're online. Where is it most that you see that individuals are struggling to embrace freedom? Because here on the coast, we see, in California, there's a lot of liberal individuals, and we're really struggling. But in the country overall, in your travels, where have you seen the people that are most in need in embracing liberty and freedom?
Well, this may seem counterintuitive, but those who are fighting hardest for liberty are those that we find in California, in Washington, in Oregon, in the state of New York. Those who are not fighting for liberty are the ones that we find in the states like my state, Florida, or even in the rural areas where people they're not really involved politically. They don't plug into the daily affairs. The farmers and the ranchers, they're so busy doing what they're doing, they don't realize what's happening. And so again, it's where the people find themselves most oppressed that you're struggling to learn more about your liberty, and it's where the people are the most comfortable is where liberty is in the most peril.
That's a very interesting viewpoint. Now, education-wise, where have you been the most effective? I mean, are you getting the most invitations to those most comfortable areas, or to those areas which are currently in a little bit of turmoil?
Well, we get invitations from we get invitations from all over the country, so it's hard to say. We don't get into the big cities often,
right,
but we do get into almost every single state. But I can tell you our largest attended meeting so far in 8 years have been the meetings that we have in the Northwest.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, to me, that says a lot, and it might say a great deal to our viewers here today. Complacency is an issue, and that comfortable tone is an issue. I noticed a lot of people were like, this last election cycle, were really not that worried about Texas. I have a heartbeat for Texas, and I'm really concerned that they're going to be shifting to the place where we have some issues coming ahead, where there's going to be maybe more of a California gleam to how they operate there. And I'm worried about that. I'm concerned for the people there. They're comfortable in red Texas, if you will.
Well, here's the thing, Erin. The shift that happens in our states like Texas happen in the urban areas. Mm-hmm. And that's because the progressives have known for a very long time what we've been trying to teach the conservatives for even longer. The power is local. And so the progressives know that if they can take over local politics, they can take over the state. Right. If they can take over the state, then they can take over the federal government. Right. The conservatives have forgotten that formula, and that's why we're trying to get back to that formula, because that's, ironically, the progressives are using the design of the formula that the drafters of our constitutional republic created.
Well, of course they are.
The conservatives that have changed. It's the conservatives who have left behind the foundational principles.
No, well, we have to get back to that. We have to get back to the basics, and remember, we have to wake up, because this what I'm seeing right now is very much a crossroads, and I know historically speaking it just doesn't maybe not look as vivid to other people, but to me it's certainly something that is of great concern. And, I'm looking here at California, and I know we were talking about the Democrat versus Republican and getting away from the party politics and the club-based view and the factions. But California just voted in a governor who wants socialized medicine, Medicare for all of California. And that's, price tag is almost double what California brings in annually. I mean, it's huge. And literally, I don't even look at that as socialized medicine. I look at him as it's like a full-blown communist takeover. They want to basically collapse everything and then have the government, take from the people and the government hand it out on every level, not just medical or medical care. This is huge because everything that's done in California impacts the rest of the nation. And I believe for those people who didn't watch our last interview, you need to go to the Erin Cruz Show, look up our last interview, because right now I want to talk about how Chris Ann and I spoke about how, I'm going to have to back up, about how this state in particular has moved to the position where we are in a communist.
I know that last time we talked about how California has deviated from its own constitution through representation.
Well, that was a big part of it. But
yeah, and the Californians are not represented in Sacramento because the California Constitution requires for every certain number of population, there has to be a representative. And your house has not been reapportioned in so long. That's why you feel frustrated and powerless, because your representatives don't represent you.
Right. Now, we talked about that, but we also talked about something else, and I just can't put my finger on it. I had it right on the tip of my tongue.
I hate when that happens.
Oh, I hate that. But it was about, the elections and what happened and, or what was happening at that time. And then now we have this guy in there that wants to put Medicare for all and all of these things. And he's basically going, oh, this is what it was. He's basically, as it relates to immigration, he's going to stand up against the federal immigration law. And he's, Jerry Brown, who is currently in there, and then now Gavin Newsom, who was also I think he was the lieutenant governor. He still is until he goes in to be the governor. They're standing against the federal immigration law. Now, they can't do that. They're trying to do that. They can't do that.
The states are a party to a contract. The contract is what created the federal government.
For some reason, I had totally missed it. But yeah, the contract was what I wanted to talk about, where the other states need to come up. So let's talk about that, because I think that people need to get perspective on this again, because we talked about that in a prior show, but we really should be talking about that in this show, because that's so important for people to recognize. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, Erin, as a matter of fact, if people want to know the book Sovereign Duty that I showed you before, this has all of that lesson in there about the Constitution and the contracts. And not only that, let me just show you, I don't know if you can see it, but the back part of the book gives you all my research. Mm-hmm. So when I teach this, I don't teach this from Chris Ann Hall's perspective. I teach this from the letters, the writings, and the instructions from the drafters of the Constitution. So just dealing with basic principles, the states created the Constitution, which is a contract.
Right.
The contract, when it was signed into law, created the federal government. So the federal government is the creation of the states. Now, through the contract of the Constitution, the states said, okay, the federal government's going to do this, 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 and everything else is reserved to the states.
Right.
Of that, this, 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 and this. Creating the uniform rule of naturalization was one of the things that the states delegated, one of the powers that the states delegated to the federal government. So it would be uniform, so that it would be the same from state to state to state. Now, this wasn't just something that they thought was a good idea. This was something that they actually lived through the consequences of not having uniform rule of naturalization.
Right.
And this is one of the consequences that we have today, Erin, of not teaching the American history properly. So our Constitution is not our first Constitution. Our first Constitution was created through the Articles of Confederation. And through the Articles of Confederation, the federal government wasn't creating uniform rule of naturalization. The naturalization, which is how someone becomes a citizen and how someone receives the benefits of citizenship, was done from state to state to state. Now, James Madison talks about it in the Federalist Papers about the national and international embarrassment and almost terrible crisis that created, that confusion. And so that's why they delegated to the federal government the authority to make the uniform rule of naturalization. Right. And so Madison does such a great job of explaining that. I don't even want to get into that, so you're going to go read Madison's papers on that. But here's the point. Because we're not teaching the Constitution properly, because we're not teaching American history properly, because we have so many people who won't even think about reading what the founders wrote because they were a bunch of rich white slave owners, which also can be disputed through fact and through history, we're repeating a mistake that was supposed to be prevented by the Constitution. And so the states, when there is a power that has been delegated, they have an obligation, a contractual obligation to each other,
yes,
to maintain that.
Mm-hmm. And that was the key component that Californians, I believe, if they can awaken and recognize this, and the people across the country can awaken and recognize this as citizens of the United States of America, California would be better off if we stand up against what has been going on, because I hate to say it, but my state is putting every other state at risk.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and now that brings us to the solution, because when you have a contract where you have parties that have all made an agreement into a single purpose, but you have one of those that are outside of that single purpose, according to contract law, it is the obligation of the other parties to come together and show the errant state where its errors are and then give them ultimatums to fix them. Now, if the state won't come into compliance with the contract, then it's the obligation of the other states, not necessarily the federal government, mostly the obligation of the other states to come to, say, California and say, hey, we're Texas, we're New Mexico, we're Nevada, we're Missouri, we're Idaho, and you're not living up to the terms of the contract. So until you change your ways, we're not going to do business with you, right? So we want Donald Trump to issue sanctions against Saudi Arabia for the death of the journalist, right? Well, that's exactly what the states ought to be doing to California, issuing sanctions to California. Now, if California still does not get back into line with the construct of the Constitution, even though the other states are putting economic and trade pressures on California, unfortunately, the next step, and this is true to contract law now, Erin, the next step is for the parties of the contract that are acting in accord to the contract to expel the non-acting party by saying, look, if you're not going to comply with the terms of the contract, you don't get to experience the benefits of the contract. Right. And then maybe it'd be temporary.
And you know what? Here's the deal. It would be smart of these other states to really hold up to their responsibility, because it is their responsibility to their citizens who are residing in their states to do so.
Absolutely.
Because right now, what California is doing, what I see my own governor to be wanting to move forward to do, is basically rising all costs up. We didn't repeal the gas tax. I mean, we already have a massive amount of gas tax that has been added on. They can change that. They can add to it at any point in time. They have the provision to be able to do that. All costs are going to rise throughout the entire state. Whenever that happens, however it happens, we're going to get to the point where all of our costs are going to be so high. Anything and everything that goes through our state to another state, okay, anything and everything, prices are going to skyrocket. They are. They have been over time, but they're going to get worse. And I would call on the people who are living outside of California to please Take a look at what Chris Ann Hall is talking about. Take a look at her book. Take a look at what the realities are and talk to your representation in your state. Because the realities are, if California is not put in check, everything we do here is going to impact the United States of America. And I'm staying here to fight because I love this state. I was born and raised here, and several generations of Californians, my family, have been here for years and years. I don't want to let us get to that space, certainly not. But I'm here to fight on the ground and do what I can here on the ground. But the people in those other 49 states need to take action because we can only do so much here, you know. But I think we need to have an awakening to the realities of the power of the people, because if the people can embrace what you're talking about and the realities of the risks that are associated with them just doing nothing. I mean, it's...
Well, here, Erin, the crazy thing is you have people all over America say, just let California go. We don't need California. No, you're wrong. California is the largest agricultural provider to the United States. We can't live without California. And I don't, and everybody knows California can't live without us.
The nation. California goes, so goes the nation. That's how I view it. And as a matter of fact, but right now what we're doing is I feel like we're a cancer. And we're growing. And I say that in the most respectful way that I could. But please get people who are listening, wrap your heads around this. We have the illegals. We have lawbreakers running around our state. We have all sorts of gangs issues, MS-13 all throughout the state. We have people who are now legally able to shoot up. We have all these things that are just festering. We have a mass amount of debt here. And then now we're going to be having these other new Democrat leaders in control. They're just going to go full force, full-fledged communism as quick as they can shove it through. And it's going to put the rest of the republic at risk, financially and otherwise. Safety-wise, national security-wise is my biggest concern, and that's with the immigration and some of these other issues. And I'm seeing that President Trump has stepped in on that level as much as he can. But there is only as much as he can do to a certain point when Congress has to get involved and do their part. People, wake up, get involved locally, get involved, empower yourselves, and the people, not just in California, outside of the state, because that's where it's going to come. California's gone, so goes the nation. And I want you to touch on that a little bit, Chris Ann, about the seceding, issue is fall off the cliff. That mindset is not what the founders had envisioned, right? They put in components so that way we could have some control. Can you talk about that a little?
Well, every state has the right to secede because it's a voluntary contract. And a contract that holds people in perpetuity forever is an illegal contract. A contract you can't get out of is an illegal contract. So we are a contract, and every state has the right to secede for whatever reason they want to secede. If Great Britain can Brexit from the UN or from the EU, then our states can exit from the American Union. That's just how it's supposed to work. But we work together differently than the EU because we started together. And we are a family together, and we don't want them to leave. And that's why the states actually standing up to California is more like a tough love, more like an intervention. Get your stuff right because we want you to stay.
Right.
We want you to be part of the family. But if you can't hold up your part of the bargain, we're not going to allow you to enjoy the benefits of the bargain. And that's simply what we have to do. And we need educated people. You guys can do it in your own state. Erin, your sheriffs in your counties can get together and shut down the non-citizens taking part in the benefits of citizenship, right? So if you're not a citizen of the United States, you ought not be allowed to get free education. You can go to private schools if you want to pay for it. You should not be allowed to have government housing, government food, government, and for goodness gracious, you ought not be voting if you are not a citizen. That is one of the primary benefits of citizenship. And your county commissions, your city councils, your your county board of elections, your sheriffs, you guys can all take that back into control.
Right, and I do believe that to be true. Unfortunately, I wasn't made aware of this, and I should have been made. For some reason, I wasn't, but I should have been made aware of this sooner. But in Northern California, they made a huge shift, and an organization literally was signing up illegal aliens to vote. And they did nothing. They did nothing. The leadership there did nothing to stop it. And me, as a United States citizen, it just signing them up to vote for not only local races, but for federal, statewide, state races and federal races. I mean,
well, in California, you actually have a non-citizen who holds government office.
Yes, we do, and that was and De Leon was so happy. Shall I call him Leon? Was so happy to announce that this was the case, and it's nauseating to me. It's nauseating to me, but it seems like every government entity that I've contacted, there's a little that you can get done. It's going to take a concerted effort by many individuals here to get that space back. What position, I mean, in terms of the parties, because that's where we started, right, is in terms of the parties and the club players and the factions, how do we get the people to wrap their mind around the fact that this isn't what the founders envisioned, and to step further away from that and more unified as citizens? Because that, I believe, is more, and I could be wrong, is more at the root of one of our problems, is people working together regardless of party.
Oh yeah, we should be united in the liberty principles, because the principles of liberty are that transcend tribe, they transcend color, party, whatever, gender, race, religious ideologies. All of them are transcended by the singular principle of liberty. So we should be united under liberty. And there's no one cookie cutter thing that you're going to be able to do to reach everybody. But I think the most important thing is that everybody watching this, everybody listening to this, has to be ready to reach their inner circle. And that's how grassroots starts. Abigail Adams said, we've seen the fire of liberty, now we watch as it catches from soul to soul. And so that's what we have to do. We have to be the catalyst to share that.
All over. You're right. You're right. We have to be the catalyst. But we also have to be educated. So we're getting close to the end of the show. I know for individuals who, talking from the Erin Cruz Show perspective, this is not something that we're offering here for the Erin Cruz Show. But if you're involved in Erin Cruz for U.S. Senate, we're going to be offering for those core team members who are involved education platform of Chris Ann Hall's. And I really am a firm believer from the Erin Cruz Show standpoint that hat on, people get engaged, get empowered, and educate yourselves. It comes down to us, and I'll go into one more thing. Last night, a very close and dear friend of mine here in the Valley sent me a flyer. It was about a local school who was having a meeting about new curriculum. It comes down to education and what we're teaching our youth. And, you know, be a part of the process. Go to your local meetings. Be a part of the school. You know, if you don't like what the school board is doing, run for school board. Do those actionable items and things that you can do to change things on a fundamental level at the ground floor. While you're waiting, don't wait long. Get the knowledge from Chris Ann Hall and get empowered. Teach your own children. And don't leave it to the powers that be to do that, because we as a nation are at a space where we need every moment that we can get to combat what is going on here. And right. Chris Ann, I have to tell you, I'm so grateful that you do what you do, and that you're so focused how you've been, and you're a light in the darkness. It's just, You're a remarkable woman. Thank you. Thank
Oh,
you.
well, it really is an honor and a pleasure for us. It's not just me either. It's the whole family.
Right.
You know, my husband and I do the radio show together, but when we travel and teach, it's everybody. Our son is 12, and he's been doing this since he was 4 years old. And so, you know, it's a labor of love because, yes, we love America, but we love liberty. And we love God that gave it to us. And so we do this as a mission for God's kingdom and for the future of America. And we're just grateful that there are people in every state like you, Erin, who are also dedicated, who will give us the platform to come in and teach.
Well, you know, we need it. I mean, that's part of the reason why I told you we've got to have you back. Because we need it. It's not a want. It's really a need because it's lacking. It's lacking. Even in our churches, in our faith groups, you know, a lot of spaces have walked away from the fundamental doctrines, the materials, which everything is based off of, and just gone to this pie in the sky movement of what feels good or what looks good. And have we lost it that far? I don't believe we have, but we have to, I think, continually keep it fresh in our minds. Everything is not taking pictures and snapping a shot of your food and putting it on social media. We have to get back to the basics, get back to the family, get back to those fundamental values. And I'm just so glad that you are a part of that, Chris Ann, because it's definitely something that we need. Now, one more time, because, you know, I want to make sure that people know where to get your information. Can you give people your website and the name of your book again? I know I have the information, but I would really like for you to talk to them and then close out and let them know one last bit message.
Well, the website, we have two websites. We have chrisannhall.com, KRISANNEHALL.com. And that's where you can get articles and videos. That's where you find our radio show, the Daily Journal. We do Monday through Thursday and then again on Saturday. And then we also have libertyfirstuniversity.com, and that's our online training. We have lots of homeschool parents who use this to supplement their curriculum. Lots of adults learning because, like I said, we haven't been learning the right thing for a long time. So that's libertyfirstuniversity.com. And the book that we talked about today is this one, Sovereign Duty. And you can find it at Amazon. You can find it at chrisannhall.com. You can find it at walmart.com. You can find it just about anywhere these days. It's actually on the Mimi Eisenhower recommended book list.
That's wonderful, despite the fact that you're considered a domestic terrorist.
Yeah, and despite the fact...
wait, I shouldn't say that out loud without an excerpt. If you could tell the people who have done this to you, put you on, you're on some sort of a list, right?
Yeah, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which has nothing to do with the South and nothing to do with poverty and even less to do with law, has put me on a list of, I know, right, has put me on their list of anti-government extremist hate groups. And I've been on their list now for 4 or 5 years.
I think you're about as far from that description as
I know.
possibly be. But,
well, that's the lunacy of the Marxist progressives. The Bible says evil will be called good and good will be called evil, and that's what they've done. They're redefining terms, but that's where we joke. I like to leave everybody with a final quote from Samuel Adams so that we can really, really understand what this is all about. Because it's not about my prosperity.
No.
It's not about my peace. It's not about Erin's prosperity or her peace either. So this is what Samuel Adams said. He said, when we tamely submit to a lawless attack upon our liberty, we encourage it, and we involve others in our doom. He said it's a serious consideration that should weigh heavy upon our hearts, that ages and millions yet unborn will be the miserable sharers of our experience. And that's, we've got to have the big picture in mind, and it's got to be about the posterity and not about our own comfort, or we'll never get off the couch.
Right. Well, we here at the Erin Cruz Show, and I'm sure at the Chris Ann Hall Show, are about being active and participating, and not because we have to, but because it is our duty, but it is also our love.
It
love
is.
for, not just for country, but for families and God, and being true to his calling and for the kingdom of heaven. Because when it comes down to it, is there are a lot of suffering people, and the United States has been a beacon of freedom for some time, and I want it to remain that way for future generations. But in order to do that, we have to get powered up in our mind and in our spirits, and power up with strong knowledge and wisdom and history, because history does repeat. It could repeat in a positive way too. So, but we have to play an active role in that to make sure that that happens in a positive way. Our founders and many veterans who have since passed have paid the ultimate price for freedom, and you know, I'll be darned if that torch has gone out on my watch. So, well, thank you again for being on the Erin Cruz Show, Chris Ann Hall. We'd love to have you back again for another teaching session.
Sure.
And God bless you.
Thank you, Erin. God bless you guys.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about the Erin Cruz Show, visit us online at erincruz.com. That's ERINCRUZ.com. Thank you for joining us, and see you at the same time and the same place next week.